think with a name like Briar Rose, he'd bring home flowers once in a while.
Lost in the woods for days. You should see her try to get herself to Walmart.
Do you know what it's like to live with 8 men? I choose to use the bathroom in the woods.
I don't want to take a magic carpet ride every night.
But I could show you the world.
I've seen the world, and it's not that special.
I'm not sure we need 240 channels on a 72-inch TV. He should pick up a book sometime.
You know, I really thought marriage would be a whole lot more charming.
Hey, we are glad you're joining us here this morning, and I just want to start by reiterating what Tammy just said, that we are thrilled you're here to celebrate Mother's Day with us. For all the moms, expectant moms, wannabe moms someday, ladies in our lives who've made a significant difference, we just celebrate you, and we're so grateful for you. But I also want to say that we acknowledge that today, although a day of celebration, can also be a day of grief and sorrow for many people, whether hopes and dreams that haven't quite been realized or people in their lives who we no longer have. And we just want to let you know that our hearts go out to you, our prayers are with you, and we're here if you want to talk to anyone or if you just want us to pray for you specifically within that. And kind of the beauty of it and what we gather here as a church to do is to acknowledge that although right now we may have grief and although right now we may have sorrow, that there will be a day, one day, when everything will be made right. And that we are, as people of faith, grounded in the eternal. And so there's always hope and there's always faith, even though right now we may not feel it. And that's actually what we're going to talk about today in the sense of being grounded in the eternal. And today we're wrapping up our series After Happily Ever After. And we're talking specifically about what do you do when you fall out of love. And today, what I'm going to go over is really, honestly, I think in somewhat, it's a testament to mothers, because moms, this is something that you do incredibly well. And what we're going to look at today, while we're going to talk about it specifically within the context of marriage, it is not just true of marriage, it is true of all relationships. But I think for all of us, maybe we need this reminder, maybe it's new information for us, but this is going to be important for us to revisit from time to time. But first, before we get into what do you do when you fall out of love, I want to talk about how do we get there. How do we actually get to that point in time when we do feel like we've fallen out of love? And I get the opportunity as a pastor that I get to go to many weddings. And I should maybe rephrase that to have to go to many weddings, because that's not necessarily my thing. And it always weirds me out. I always say, like, if I do someone's ceremony, I say I officiated the wedding. And I always want to be careful with my language, because I have some other pastor friends and they just say, oh, I married them. And it always throws me off when people say that, oh, I married them, because it makes me think they've got like a polygamy thing going on there. And I was like, no, I officiated their wedding. No further than that. So I get to work with couples a lot, prepping the wedding and going through stuff like that. And I'll meet with them beforehand. And I always do when we do the rehearsal thing the night before, I always tell them there's always two specific things I do. The first thing, and this is hopefully helpful information to you, I say, do not lock your knees. Whatever you do, at no point in time in the ceremony, do not lock your knees out. Because if you're skittish at all, you will pass out. And people are like, is that really true? Like, yes, it's true. I've seen it happen. Like, don't do it. You don't want to end up on America's Funniest Home Videos. Like, do not lock your knees. And then the second thing I do at the rehearsal dinner is I always ask the bride, I go, okay, who's really in charge? Like, there's somebody, like, who's the power broker here? Who's making all the decisions? And sometimes it's the bride, but is it like the overbearing mom? Is it like the in-charge aunt? Is it the sleazy uncle? Like, I want to know, like, Who's really in charge? Because there's always somebody, and like the bride will usually like, I don't want to like go through this because like I want to move things quickly because I don't want to be there forever. And like normally it'll be like if someone has a question, they'll ask the bride, and then the bride will pretend like she's asking the groom. Like, I feel obligated to ask your opinion because we're exchanging vows, but I don't really care that much. And so she'll ask the groom, and then she'll look to someone else, and I'll go, who's she looking to? I want to know who's that person because I'm going straight to them. But as we prep the ceremony, often I'll ask couples, like, do you have, like, anything special? Do you have, like, a song or a poem or, like, a ceremony? Are you going to do, like, the sand thing or the unity candle or, like, tie a knot? Or what do you have, like, something that you're doing and or a scripture verse? And when I meet with couples beforehand, this cracks me up, is they'll kind of phrase it, they'll be like, I was sitting down there, writing down the different parts of the ceremony. I'm like, yeah, we did choose a scripture verse that we would like for to be read by my aunt or cousin or something like that. I'm like, oh, okay, what is it? And I'm already writing down 1 Corinthians 13. Like, I've already got it written on the paper. And like, oh, we would like 1 Corinthians 13. We're like, oh, that's great. So surprising. Exciting. And what I can tell, they kind of have this picture that like the day they get married, that they're going to kind of be up there. They're going to be as dressed up as they've ever been. They're going to have all their friends and family are around. And it's kind of like going to be this like special moment. Some stuff has already happened. Maybe they've exchanged vows yet. Maybe they haven't. And then 1 Corinthians 13 is going to be read. And it sounds, here's just bits and pieces of it. And yet I will show you the most excellent way. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. And love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. Love never fails. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me, and now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. And they kind of just have this picture that like as they stand up there in front of everybody and these words are going to be read, that like kind of everybody out in the crowd is just going to look at them holding hands up there and be like, yeah, that's true. We kind of have this thought that 1 Corinthians 13 is going to be a testimony of who we are. And that's how we view it. It's a testimony of who we are. It is a statement of our incredible love for one another. And then what happens next? Well, that's when we get into the after, happily ever after. When they get in the carriage and they start to ride off right before the credits roll and they lived happily ever after, what happens then? Well, a whole host of things. A whole host of stress and tensions that come in. Conversations that you've never had to have before, regardless of how long you've been together or your living arrangements or any of those other things. And all of a sudden you have to like talk in depth of like, how are we managing our money? How are we doing this? Which just on the money thing, that's why this summer we're offering Financial Peace University, because we've heard many couples say, hey, we went through that and we no longer fight about money. So I would say, if you're there, that's worth it to do it, to no longer fight about money. But it's kind of like all these comments, like, how do we do this? How do we handle chores? Who does what? And it just makes me laugh when I meet with couples ahead of time and someone's like, well, how are you gonna manage your household? Which was like, no one wants to talk about that. Like, oh yes, please, let's talk about how we're gonna manage our household. And sometimes couples will be like, well, I just think it should be like, no one really has a role. You just do whatever needs to be done. If someone sees something that needs to be done, you just do it. Like the dishes, just do them. Laundry, just do it. Sweep the floor, just do it. And I'm like, yeah, that's gonna work out fantastic. You guys have at that. Good luck to you. It is kind of like, so there's like all these things where before it was just kind of like romantic and moments and feeling, and all of a sudden things get harder. And then there's the whole other side of stuff, not just the tensions and stresses that come in. Honestly, it's kind of the boredom. That when you're dating or you're engaged, everything is new and there's kind of like new steps ahead. And it's exciting, all the newness to it. And you may be moving towards getting married, and that's new, and you've never been there before. And then you get married, and there's kind of like this routine that sets in. And it's kind of like go to work, come home, eat dinner, watch Netflix, go to bed. Go to work, come home, eat dinner, watch Netflix, go to bed. And then you have kids, and it's go to work, come home, eat dinner, give baths, chase kids around the house, change diapers, go to bed, wake up, go back to bed, wake up again, go back to bed, to that. And then your kids get older, and the routine is a little different. It's go to work, come home, eat dinner, go to ball practice, go to bed. And it just feels cyclical, and you just kind of run in the same pattern, in the same rhythm over and over again. And what within that relationship, maybe at one point in time was special and exciting because it was new, it now feels old and a little tired. And before, maybe when you would just kind of grab hold of every moment you had together, now it's kind of this thing of, okay, you watch TV, I'll read a book. You're going to go downstairs, I'll stay upstairs. You sleep in that bed, I'll sleep in this bed. And what happens is at one point in time, what was exciting and what was new and what was thrilling has now become old and common. And then at some point in time in your relationship, you'll get invited to a wedding. But this wedding's different because instead of being like up front in front of all your friends and all your family, you're sitting out in the crowd. And you're kind of going through, and they go through the ceremony, and they have some different things come up of song and message and scripture, and these different things move on. And then at some point in time, the officiant, the pastor, will get up there and he'll read 1 Corinthians 13. And when you're out in the crowd, it sounds a little different now. And yet I will show you the most excellent way. Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. And you hear it, and you think, that may be true of them, but I don't think that's true of me. It may be a testimony of who they are, but for me right now, 1 Corinthians 13 is simply a reminder of who we were. So what do you do with that? Well, this is, I get to talk to lots of couples, and this is how most people respond. For some people, it's kind of like this awakening, like, oh my goodness, something needs to change. And so what they'll typically try to do is they'll try to recreate the past. They'll take like a snapshot of a moment in their relational history when things seemed really good, and they just go, we just need to get back to that. We just need to have that happen again. And the problem is that doesn't work because you're both different people. You've changed, you've grown, and I'm not saying that is a bad thing, but it never works to recreate the past when you have moved forward personally. And so most people fall into one of two camps. Either they give up officially, they sign papers and part ways, or they give up emotionally, which is where I would say probably the vast majority of people are. We're gonna be together, we're gonna stick it out, we're gonna tough through it, but there's nothing really there. We may do it to save face, we may do it for kids, we may do it because we don't want people to talk about us, but it's not that connection, it's not that love anymore, we're just there. And here's my concern with that. Not just the non-hopeful life that it is. While I think it is noble, and while I think it is honorable to go through those actions, and those are fantastic intentions, the really risky thing about that is anytime you go through a period of life, whatever arena it's in, with only half your heart, you run the risk of becoming a half-hearted person in all of your life. Anytime you take one aspect of your life and you say, I'm going to give 50% here, or I'm just going to coast through it here, you run the risk of that becoming your entire existence, which is a very dangerous thing to do with our souls. And so, what do? If we can't recreate the past, if we don't want to part ways officially, and if just emotionally giving up is not working, how do we move forward? And this is where 1 Corinthians 13 is so incredibly important. Because instead of being a testimony of who we are, or instead of just sticking there as a reminder of who we were, it actually moves us forward and gives us a path ahead. And that's what I want to look at today. So if you have your Bible with you, we're going to be in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and we're going to look at this whole chapter because it is wonderfully, incredibly written, and there is so much there. And I'm just going to go ahead and start reading verse 1, and then I'll kind of come back and explain what's going on. So it actually starts with this. The end of chapter 12 is, and yet I will show you the most excellent way, which is just like a beautiful prologue to any set of scripture. And then it dives in.
It says, if I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. And when we usually read that, this is what we typically think as we move through it. We think that this is the writer of Corinthians is the Apostle Paul, who I describe. He is the hero of the first century church. He takes the church and the message of the church to all these places that it wasn't before. And then he goes back and he writes letters to these different churches to correct them and show them some different things that they've done wrong. And we almost think in this moment, this is Paul. Paul's a poet. He is writing just this beautiful prose to show us the magnificence and the depth of love. But here's the hard thing with that, is Paul is not a poet. If Paul lived today, I have every belief that he would be an engineer. That is how he thinks. That is how he's wired. And you can even look at it, if you flip through 1 Corinthians, if you just go 2-3 chapters back, he talks about the need for self-discipline. If you move just a little bit beyond this chapter on love, he talks about having good order in your worship services. He goes, some of you, you're not prepping your worship services out enough. You need to have a plan. And so there's almost the sense that he goes from we need self-discipline, we need to have good order, but first let me write some poetry. And that's actually not what he's doing. The Corinthians, the church that he is writing to, they were fascinated with what I typically describe as weird religion. And I'm not saying incorrect religion, I'm not saying false religion, but I'll say it as weird religion, and this is how I understand it. And many of you are in this spot, so you'll get this entirely. If you grew up in the church, you're kind of at a disadvantage at this. But when you come into the church and it's brand new for you, there's some weird things that Christians do. There are, maybe the most simple example is people who call each other brother who are not brothers. Weirds me out. So confusing. And then we moved to Maysville. I'm not originally from Maysville, and I realized almost everyone is related anyway. So I couldn't tell who's brother in faith and who's legitimately brother. That messed me up for a while. But then there's other things we talk about when you follow Christ, we believe the Holy Spirit comes in and as part of you, as part of who you are, and enables you to live a life for God. Now, just to be clear, I believe in that, but that's a little weird, is it not? The Holy Spirit of God comes and indwells your life. It's that's not a great conversation starter with a stranger. So there's some things that are weird. In this church, what happens is they get fascinated. They get obsessed with the weird. And that's actually what he's addressing if you look at it really clearly. He says, if I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I'm just a resounding gong. He says, gift of prophecy can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge. They kind of had this thing where they would stop and pray and just ask God to reveal things to them that they did not know, which is a great thing. But he goes, but if I do that, if I have a faith that moves mountains, but I don't have love, I'm nothing. They would commonly teach this thing, which again, I think it's a correct teaching, that whatever you give on earth, you will be rewarded for in heaven. And so they were almost having these competitions of let's see who can give more. Let's see who can live on less so they'll be rewarded the most. Not let's just do this out of good intentions, not do this out of the virtue of love. Let's do this to see who's getting the most later. He goes, but if I do that, but I don't have love, I gain nothing. So this is important. This is not poetry. What Paul is writing here is very practical, and he's saying, you have become obsessed with the wrong things. Not that these are incorrect, not that they're not true, but you have become obsessed with the weird part of faith. And you need to ground yourself in what's most significant. And then this is what he writes, starting in verse 4. It says, love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. And this is what we think. We get in our relationship, we see people who we think, hey, this is a testimony of who they are, but for us it's just a reminder of who we were. And we almost this is kind of the picture that I get, we almost view this as like a police lineup. Like we're looking for a suspect, he's like 5'8", brown hair, blue eyes, kind of stocky. And go, if someone doesn't fit that description, then no, it's not them. And we almost view this in the same way. This like if you have love, then it'll be patient and kind and not self-seeking, and it'll protect and trust and hope and persevere. And then we look at our relationship and we go, that's not true. Our love doesn't protect, so it can't be love. But that's a fundamental misreading of what Paul is trying to teach us here. He's not giving us a description of simply evidence that you have love. He's giving us a path forward to have love. Let me say it like this. He starts with this. Love is patient. If we go back one. Love is patient. Well, here's the question. Not am I patient? Not do we have patience, so do we have love? The question is this. Can I be patient? Not do I want to be patient. Can I be patient? Yeah. Yeah. I love the prayer, Lord, give me patience, but not just yet. No, love is patient. Can I be patient? Yeah. Well, Paul would go, that's love. Love is kind. Not am I kind, not do we have kindness. Can I be kind? Yeah, you can. Sometimes I doubt it with my kids. But yeah, we can. And Paul goes, yeah, that's love. Let's continue. Let's skip down a little. It is not easily angered. Can I not be easily angered? Yeah, but they just always do this. No. Can I do that? Yeah. And Paul would go, that is love. And this is what is revealed within this statement. I think this is massively important. That we don't act in love because we feel love. We feel love because we act in love. We do not act in love because we feel love. We feel love because we act in love. Let me explain it like this. It's the difference between understanding your emotions as the head or the tail. Are your emotions the thing that leads you, or are your emotions the thing that comes along after you have already made decisions? And the hilarious thing about this to me is that we have embraced this adult understanding that emotion should operate as the tail. I should not be simply led by my emotions. I lead and my emotions follow in almost every arena of our lives except for faith and relationships. Like I know of, like I wake up early in the morning to go to the Y. Do I want to? No. Am I glad once I've gone? Yes. I attempt the majority of the time. That's a stretch. I attempt sometimes to eat healthy. At no point in time has anyone ever said, like, hey, if I ask, hey, what are we having for dinner? We're having brownies. At no point in my life have I ever gone, oh, no. No. Yes. Yes, I would like some brownies. Are we having dessert? Brownies. That's fantastic. Like, I've never done that. And yet, like, I don't live that way. Because I understand that I need to make smart, wise choices, and then my emotions will follow that. But then we get in relationships and we go, I don't feel love. So I'm not going to act in love. And we make our emotions the thing that leads us, when the more fundamental understanding is they're the things that follow once we've already made the wise decisions. And this gets into understanding the perceived value of things. You may have heard the story before, but the best violin player in the world, Joshua Bell, he was challenged by the Washington Post. They were going to do this story. And they wanted to see what would happen if he went and played in a Union Terminal down in Washington, D.C. And so he went down there. And for 45 minutes, the best violin player in the world played down in Union Terminal at rush hour as thousands and thousands of people went past him. And he played for 45 minutes with a violin that is worth $3.5 million. The night before, he had played a concert, and the average price of a seat was $100. He plays to sold-out crowds all over the world. But when he played in the subway system for 45 minutes, he made $32. And it's all about how do we perceive the value of different things. And this is what I see happening within relationships. And honestly, this is what scares me and should concern us, and it applies far further than just relationships. We take what is sacred and we begin to treat it as common. And anytime we do that, we will begin to value and view it as common. We do this in marriage, we do this with kids, we do this with other people, we do this with our faith, we do this with our worship. We take what is sacred and we begin to treat it as common. And then we will view it as common and ordinary. And the thing that gets hard within the tension of marriage in particular is that there is a routine, there is a rhythm, and the routine can get old. But that doesn't change the person. I know more about my wife than I do anyone else on the face of this earth. But that doesn't make her common. She's extraordinary. Because within each and every person, within every single person, are subtle nuances and quirks of personality and giftings and ability and values and perspective and insight that no one else on the face of this earth has. Because each and every one of us has been uniquely and divinely created. And to any time, treat someone who has been created as ordinary is to remove the sacredness with which they were meant to have. And I think this even gets into the perspective of how we view all of life. And sadly, what's happened, I'm getting into stuff that I shouldn't be, but I don't know how to stop now. We get into these views of the sanctity of life that the church has had and historically held, in which for some reason the message that we've given is that life begins at conception and somehow stops at birth. And then we don't care about the sanctity of life after that. Every person matters. Every life has value. Everyone is significant. It is when we treat what is sacred as common that we have missed the mark. And we have lost perspective as to what is actually happening. And this is where 1 Corinthians 13 grounds us where we were always meant to be. So we start with this. The 1 Corinthians 13 is a testimony of who we are. And then as we move on, things get a little boring and it becomes a reminder of who we were. But Paul shows us that 1 Corinthians 13 was meant to be a blueprint for who we could become. It was meant to ground us in a perspective, in a way of life that values the other person and treats them how they were meant to be treated. And as a result of that, views them as to who they really are. This is the only way to read this passage. It's not poetry. It's beautiful. If you want to view it as beautiful, yes, it absolutely is. But this is Paul's practical advice of what do you do when you fall out of love in any arena of life. And then he sends it, let me just show you real quickly some couple things that he says next. Verse 8, he says this, he says, love never fails. Now, if you read it any other way, you would have to disagree with him, right? Yes, it does. Did you see their relationship? Did you see my relationship? Love fails. Paul goes, no. When you do this, love never fails. If you view love as a passing, fleeting feeling, it'll fail. If you view love as the actions you take for the feeling to follow, love never fails. And then he continues, he says, but where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part. But when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. Oh, that last part is massive. He says, guys, here's the deal. We grew up. We got jobs. We have mortgages. We have responsibilities. Let's stop loving immaturely. This is the childish way of viewing love. That if I care about it, then I care about it. If I don't, then I don't. He goes, no, let's be adults here. Let's understand, emotions are the tail. We lead. We decide, we lead. But we don't feel love. And so we act, and then we feel love. And then he takes this incredible shift at the end. And I want to invite the band to come out because they're going to play a song with us as we close. But he has these last two verses at the end, which for me, for the longest time, didn't make sense. But what he does in here is amazing. Verse 12, it says this. He says, for now we see, only your reflection is in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. And that last part threw me off for the longest time. And I felt like when I was a kid, we would play these like would you rather games. I don't know if any of you played this. It'd be like, would you rather have hands on your feet or feet on your hands? Would you rather like give up bacon for the rest of your life or lose the last 2 years of your life? Anyone else play these? No one else? Would you rather see through your nose or sniff through your eyes? Okay, good. Some of you played. And I thought that's what Paul was doing. I was like, he goes, hey, would you rather have faith, hope, and love? Oh, it's love. I was like, what? What's that? But here's what he shows us. There will be a day in eternity when you have no more need for faith. Hebrews describes faith as confidence in things unseen. And what Paul is saying here is he says, now we see in a mirror dimly, then we shall see face to face. He's saying that there will be a day within heaven that there is no more faith. Because there's no need for faith. There's only trust because we see face to face. There will be a day when there is no more hope because all our hopes have been realized. And so hope does not exist anymore because it's now reached its culmination. But he says, not love. Faith will one day be unnecessary. Hope will be fulfilled. But love is here forever. And what he's encouraging within these words is to ground yourself in something that is eternal. To ground yourself in what is everlasting and will never fade. And to take the things within our lives that we commonly treat as common and to recapture the sacredness with which they were created. And so this is what we're going to do. We're going to sing a song together that we sang earlier that talks about God's love for us. And I think for some of us, when we talk about sacred things that have been made common, maybe that is our greatest temptation and sin, is to take the extraordinary, overwhelming message of God's grace, mercy, love, and forgiveness, and to view it as trite, to view it as simple, to view it as ordinary. And I think any time we have lost awe and wonder with the world that we live in, with the people who we live with, and with the God who we have been created by, it is our fault, not theirs, not his. And it's our responsibility as adults to act in a way that leads so our feelings will follow. And I hope this has been an encouragement to you in your marriage, parents, in your relationships, but most of all, within your faith.